Good morning on the West Coast, good afternoon on the East Coast, and happy days everywhere in between. Today is Wednesday, August 9th, and it's a beautiful day to have a webinar. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and direct response advertising industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI family, it's my pleasure to welcome you back for yet another fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. And today we're joined by two incredibly talented industry leaders, including Meghan Glenn of Flowcode and Blaine LaFleur of Vested. And together we'll be discussing best practices for managing your QR codes and performance-driven marketing campaigns. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use the questions tab located in the control panel. Also, please know you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's discussion, but we will hold all replies to conversations to your questions to the end of the conversation. Alrighty, folks, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. He once ordered a Big Mac at Burger King and got one. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business Development at Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCSD extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. And for the 71st time, because today is our 71st episode, take it away, my friend.
Fantastic. Thank you, John, and welcome in Blaine and Meghan. We're so happy to have you here. Episode 71, talking about QR code best practices. Now, look, we all know that the future of marketing has been and will continue to be omnichannel. So that means attribution and response tracking. It needs to be available across a variety of customer touch points. Now, the digital domain has always leaned into impressions, opens, views, and clicks to get really tight performance reporting. But the offline world had been struggling to kind of catch up with that kind of granularity and precision, that is, until QR codes. In the past and Wayback Machine, you had to use an app and it was a real pain. But with the pandemic and with restaurants and with new smartphone technology with built-in camera access, QR codes have become ubiquitous now to marketers. From bus wraps, CTV spots, in-arena displays, and direct mail, QR codes are weaving into all the channels of performance marketing. And you could argue no QR code service have become more of a part of the fabric of performance marketing better than Flowcode. Flowcode has seen trillions of scans go through its platform and is in a unique position to kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, and how to make the most of this tactic to engage customers and pull them through your funnel. So we're going to talk some fundamentals. We're going to talk to new and emerging techniques. We're going to hear some real life examples and all the stuff that excites customers, importantly, and for you folks at home, makes marketers come back from the office feeling proud that they've accomplished something of meaning. So one thing as a note, as we were preparing for this, just last weekend, I was watching the EPL Summer Series on Peacock, and lo and behold, right in the beginning was a big ad from Southern New Hampshire University. And what was on that spot? A Flowcode. Right in the lower left corner throughout the entire ad. It was perfect. And I was like, this is awesome. And so I guess, Meghan, we'll start with you. Yes. If you have a client serving the Flowcode on a CTV ad, is it a fair thing to say that that's a signal that they are putting them on other channels as well?
Increasingly, yes, absolutely. So I think in the early days, we often saw kind of siloed adoption of QR in general, and then of course Flowcode as people kind of move toward a more sophisticated solution. You'd often see kind of dabbles in testing, right? So I'm going to activate first with my TV, first with my direct mail. But increasingly, the way that we've seen it is that, you know, people are starting to understand that if you put a Flowcode, if we boil it down to the idea that Flowcode makes everything clickable, and then you can put a Flowcode in virtually every impression of your messaging, from in-home CTV and broadcast and direct mail to out-of-home signage, jumbotrons, drones in the sky, as Blaine knows, you realistically can start tracking not only the engagement and the potential for e-com across all of those placements, but also tracking a consumer as they interact with all of them. How can you watch somebody go from point A to point Z? Flowcode's a really great solution because it's so sit forward and so intentional. Provides a really strong optimization signal. So I think a lot of very savvy marketers that we're working with now are starting to lean more into that kind of holistic solution to get that 360 view at how a consumer is being driven to convert ultimately.
That's wonderful. And speaking of savvy marketers, we've got Blaine. He's a HubSpot certified diamond partner in his marketing agency. Blaine, where are you seeing some of the best engagement with Flowcodes?
Our best engagement is coming from TV, but it has to be tied to some sort of giveaway. I think where a lot of people make mistakes is they just throw a QR code on something expecting engagement. Our best engagement comes from what we're giving to the consumer. What we're doing with Flowcodes is just removing the friction of that giveaway. So, and getting more data from that, not just their sign up, but location and other things. So yeah, it's give the consumer something and tie it to that, and you're gonna have really good engagement.
I like that idea. And I want to get back to that in terms of some of the giveaways that you've seen work. I guess, Meghan, speaking of that, you've mentioned before in some other conversations that, it's the flow code itself isn't, the code's awesome, but it's what you do with it and how you create it and what engagement you promise the customer. So what are some must-do steps and tactics that marketers should take, and what are some avoid pitfalls that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hilarious. Blaine and I were having this exact conversation right before this call. People aren't responding to the code, they're responding to your messaging. And so the thing that I always kind of come back to, just as a very, very basic, is, we've always been told, working in advertising for a long time, when you want the consumer to do something, be explicit about telling them, right? So back in the day, it was call the 800 number, and then it was visit our website. Now actually saying scan the code, scan the flow code will drastically drive up that adoption and that engagement with that code. And oftentimes being able to say what is waiting for them behind the code is even going to take that even further. Some of the best activations that we've seen have been so simple in terms of what is being, offered, whether it's playing a game, participating in a poll, accessing exclusive content, or in our most stellar activations, like the ones that Blaine has done with Dr. Phil, scan to enter a contest, scan for your chance to win. These are super simple activations that the consumer immediately understands. There's inherent value exchange. And the trade-off is massive, because with that one impression and with that one message and with that one scan, you're able to get a bona fide lead from a sit forward audience member, where you can build out a new database or create remarketing. Anything like that is available. Now, that is assuming you have the call to action figured out and you have the value exchange pinpointed. Other really important things that might seem kind of basic, but are also super important. Duration, time on screen is always going to be super kind of a very impactful variable when it comes to looking at what drives scan results. You have to make sure that it's up long enough for a consumer to acknowledge it. So if you're running with shorter creatives, it certainly won't hurt you to put a flow code in it, but maybe drive for frequency so you build some of that muscle memory with those scanners. But then, looking for opportunities where you're maybe running with like a longer form segment or 30 seconds plus, you're really going to get awesome scan results if you have code persistence that whole time. And also prominence, so the thing that I often say is, don't pigeonhole yourself or kind of shortchange yourself with phoning in your QR activations. Consumers far and away say that they actually have higher brand recall on interactive ads, that they prefer branded codes because it feels more intentional on behalf of that the brand using a QR code. And obviously, if the code is too small or not branded or otherwise not functional, you're creating negative consumer experience where there really doesn't need to be any. So really paying attention to kind of ease of scanning, troubleshooting that scan, and making sure that that code is big enough to be scanned from the couch, huge difference makers when it comes to actually driving that scan activity. And always pay attention to the post scan too. You know, we saw a lot of examples. I know that it's been months now, but you look at even huge activations like the Super Bowl and saw so many of these QR enabled creatives that were incredible in theory, but had broken post scan experiences. And, you know, nobody's talking about the commercial when the post scan doesn't work. So definitely some things to keep in mind.
That's excellent. Those are fantastic snippets of the 30-second plus second, the prominence, duration, and time on screen, that a really simple call to action. And I love big enough to be scanned from the couch or from your seat too. I guess, you know, Blaine, when you're talking to clients about flow codes and about the usage of them, have you, you know, do you have to overcome any kind of resistance or skepticism?
Honestly, no, because I just show them previous examples of the campaigns that we've done, and they convert so high, it's a no-brainer. The only thing I would say from a marketing standpoint is I have to slow people down from trying to use them too much and overusing them to where they're not good, like, because you'll get a negative feedback from it. It's like, well, it didn't work. Well, you can't just throw a QR code on something and expect it to just work. And I was talking to Meghan about this earlier. Whenever we did a Broadway show, Broadway wouldn't allow us to just throw QR codes in our program like we wanted to, because we didn't control it. Broadway controlled it. And so we tried to throw, just to sneak one in there, and it didn't work. I mean, it underperformed crazy, you know? So, I mean, you can't just, so if that had been the first time we used QR code, everyone would have said, well, this doesn't work. So that's the only skepticism I would avoid, is just be really strategic from a marketing standpoint. If you want to push this to your customers, don't just say, let's use QR codes and see if they work. Be really strategic with your campaign, that you're going to give something away, and wait till you have something really big or decent, like enough behind it to be able to get engagement, because it converts way better than social media post or, you know, click this link type engagement.
Great. So I guess, do you see also too, Meghan, where we've talked about a couple of places, but do you have a specific event or channel or campaign where using a flow code is an absolute no-brainer? Because it doesn't apply to everything, but where does it like apply obviously?
It's definitely, I'm too biased to give you like a solid no-brainer answer, because I am inherently going
everything.
literally that. Well, Chris, so anything linear, anything like for me, the one that always feels like the biggest difference maker and the biggest needle mover is linear spot, right? So
okay.
if you're running 30s, or you've got like a 2-minute branded segment that you're running, you know, really like these traditional media placements that people keep kind of saying like, oh, broadcast isn't there, the audience isn't there, whatever, so on and so forth. We've got millions and millions and millions of data points to show 100% that the audience is there, that they're extremely engaged, and that they're willing to purchase product off of their TV screens. So what feels like the biggest no-brainer to me is the position, you know, in TV that makes things interactive, and in our case, immediately shoppable, immediately engageable. You know, I mean, the metric, it really is, the metric is something crazy. Like 50% of people who have seen a shoppable ad recall that brand, and 70% of people who engage with a shoppable ad go on to purchase product. And so when we're looking at things like, you know, conversion rates and ROI, where do we need the most proof of that? Broadcast, offline media, you know, anything in that space. but also where is the consumer desire for it? And we increasingly see an increase in mobile spending, an increase in QR adoption, and an increase in reception to shoppable ads. So that's my area of focus right now. But don't get me started on out of home. I mean, click metrics for out of home, pinpoint geo for out of home. I mean, it really gets the wheels turning a little bit anytime I think about it. So
no, that's wonderful. And I love that idea where, if you are running linear spots, that's more than 30 seconds, right? And you are doing that and you've got a shoppable product, this becomes that shoppable TV. So anyone in the audience who's currently doing that is absolutely something to think about as that no-brainer tactic. I guess, Blaine, for your clients, I'm not sure what the mix of B2C or B2B, if you have any B2B, and if so, do you see a different application for QR codes in those market spaces?
What's crazy is that majority of my clients are B2B.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of them are. But the B2C approach for these codes are amazing. But I would say even in the B2B world, the application that we're all there, it's not consumers, they're still people. So just being strategic. So from the B2C application, it's probably more broad where you can use it for multiple avenues because you're trying to get as many consumers as possible. From the B2B, the way I've used it for B2B is, I won't let any print media go out or any billboard or anything that they're going to put out without a QR code because I'm trying to drive traffic to a web page, right? To get more information and to create authority. Because the big thing in B2B is creating authority. And it's hard to do that with a brochure. How are you going to be the authority with a brochure? You want to drive traffic to your website so that they really start thinking that you are the authoritative person in that industry. So that's how I've used it in B2B. B2C, it's any idea that I can get a new lead and a new contact. So
excellent. No, that's a great use for B2B. I guess one question I'll have for you, Meghan, because we've got a couple more questions and we've got just a little bit of time left because you guys know your stuff so well. This has been great. I think that you had mentioned that you've got these out of home, and oftentimes the out of home are static, but with a channel like direct mail, you can actually create personalized codes so that it's unique to each individual on the address.
Yeah. Yep, you absolutely nailed it, Chris. So one of the things that we're really exploring as a company is the idea of personalization, right? That's another thing that we see in terms of where the industry is going is while we are steering away from sharing our data, our expectation that things are catered to us is going up. So when we look at Flowcode as being such a strong signal of intent, we're like, this is somebody that we should be catering the post-scan experience to. And like when we look at direct mail, there's this perfect marriage of super opted-in action with also the first-party data that you already have at the household level, right? So essentially the way that it works in direct mail is being able to generate codes in bulk so that each household who receives a piece of mail has its own unique data signal, right? So every household is kind of siloed down for measurement. And what's really compelling about that is, from the outside, the creative all looks exactly the same. There's no real additional tech lift and there's no additional lift for the brand. But on the back end, you can start saying, okay, well, Meghan's household is interested in these types of products and offers versus Blaine's household is interested in these types of products and offers. And you eventually reach critical mass of saying, hey, of all of my recipients, I now know down to the one-to-one level how these people respond to messaging. And, it certainly makes it a little bit easier to select out the audiences who are most likely to drive that ROI, right? So you're kind of taking the guesswork out. And that can be accomplished in just about any medium. So broadcast, obviously, we can take that one off the table. But if you look at things like CTV advertising, digital out of home, anything that's essentially triggered on an impression by impression basis, we have the capability of isolating down that scan data straight to that one single impression. So instead of saying, I ran a CTV campaign and I think I had a 30x frequency and this person Googled me at some point in this campaign, you're now saying, I served this person X number of impressions. It took the third view for them to scan this code, come to my site, make a purchase. And because that's person is so direct, it's an awesome lookalike opportunity too. So ultimately, it's all in a goal of, again, personalizing the experience, having a one-to-one relationship with that person in the household, you know, personalizing out the post-scan experience based on that user, and then rinsing and repeating, kind of optimize the way we've never been able to with offline media before.
That's true, because if you get those household addresses of the scanners, you know out of all of your mailings who's engaged, and then you can use that to create a customer profile of folks most likely to be engaged with your message. I love it. I love it. Blaine, we're going to wrap up a final question with you, because I'm sorry, Megan, we're close on time, but Blaine, I understand. Blaine, I understand that you've got a best practice example that you can share with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, the number one that we've ever done is with Dr. Phil. We keep mentioning it. I mean, the giveaway with Dr. Phil, because it was a longer, it was on screen longer, and then he was giving something away that he's never really done before. We were giving away a hoodie, honestly. It wasn't even that big a deal, but he doesn't have.
Is it the one that you have on? Did you scan that
No.
QR code yourself?
No, I wanted though. No, I mean, he never had merch, right? So it was a new thing that he was doing, and his fans were kind of asking for it, but we tied it back to a QR code, and I think we got 70,000 to 80,000 new contacts. It was insane. Yeah. Yeah.
And
so
part that's crazy, and you know, Blaine and I are kind of working together on this activation. First of all, you guys can click the link in the chat if you want to see the promo spot that was run. This ran in commercial airtime, so this was not in segment. This is a really good example of one of these like minute-long broad rotators that ran in linear inventory. Running it, launching it the day of, and seeing the scans come in. I didn't even know, this is the other thing, this is the inside scoop. I didn't even know that those spots were going live, but we have real-time data, and I saw this massive data spike in my dashboard, and I was like, what the heck is running right now? Come to find out, it was the Dr. Phil spots, and every day there were thousands and thousands of people scanning, entering their email, and now Dr. Phil has a really robust database of audience members who have
first-party data. It's astonishing. That's a wonderful story. Great job, team. Like we thought, this is moving quickly. So we're at 11:25, and Johnny, I'm sure that there are questions from the audience, and we want to make sure we get to those.
Nope, total crickets out there. Just kidding, Chris. There's a ton of questions. I just want to see how you responded to it. Great session so far, guys. Thank you so much. Let's start with the base level question. What kind of lift can a marketer expect to experience when properly implementing a QR code to their campaign?
Ooh, great question. Blaine, I don't know if you have a specific example that you can speak to. I have broad ones.
Because of Flowcode, this is not a promo for Flowcode. They have flow pages. So even like speaking about Dr. Phil, I got called on the day that they were about to run a segment, and they were like, we need a new code, and we need to be able to sign up, and we need to be able to do this. And I'm not joking, it took me 5 minutes to duplicate a code, create a flow page, because it's a landing page, and I can put it on my domain, which I did, and then have the call to action on that flow page. It was done. So then in 5 minutes, I was able to give them what they needed. And the same thing when I'm doing stuff for the brothers, it's, you know, middle of Broadway in intermission, I get like, they had 2 songs left, and one of the guys said, hey, we want to throw a QR code on the screen during intermission and drive them to the merch and give them free shipping. And I was like, oh my goodness, okay. So quickly created the QR code, the ad mat that went on the screen with the landing page. Like I said, I had 2 songs left. So it was like 6-7 minutes before I actually throw it up there. So now I'm not advising you go that route, but the lift can be extremely small because of Flowcode. That's why I keep going to them, because I don't have to create a web page, a whole website page that points to it. I just use the flow page, which is super simple.
Very, very low technical lift. And then when you look at things like site lift, so, you know, brand lift, site lift, you know, without giving away confidential information, what I can tell you is that when I was a Flowcode client myself, we saw any day that we ran a code, let's say like in a cooking segment, right? Sponsored segment. Anytime we ran a code in a cooking segment, we'd see 10x our average site traffic in one day. We also, if you were to look at things like site lift over time, what's really incredible is that Flowcode scanners have an incredibly high likelihood of repeat visits. So we often see people scanning the code and then coming back. So that's pretty significant. And also about 90% plus of Flowcode scanners, at least in case studies that we've seen, have been incremental new traffic to a website. So you know, it's dependent entirely on, obviously, your messaging, your placement, who your audience is. But when you look at kind of the actual just mathematics around it, you can expect significant lift, you know, just if you're in these high volume placements. And the depth of engagement always ends up being pretty significant too. We usually see 3x the time on site compared to other traffic sources.
Interesting.
And we also see page depth usually in the neighborhood of 4 to 7 pages per session.
Wow.
Wow, that's a ton of information. Thank you, Megan. That's awesome. Let's try another question. What business sectors are you finding having the most success with QR codes in advertising? And are there any sectors that are underutilizing QR codes, but you kind of think or consider are ripe for future success?
Blaine, do you want to take that one first? Or do you want me to?
You take that. You have way more industry. Yeah.
Okay, so first part of the question was where are we seeing, like what verticals we're seeing significant success in, right? So
Yes.
One of the easiest ones is really going to be kind of what I would call impulsive retail. So, you know, shoppable ads for things that are generally under the $50 mark. You know, we'll see a lot of instantaneous checkout, instantaneous conversion on ads like that, oftentimes north of 15 to 20%. So 15 to 20% of your Flowcode scanners will go on to purchase that product. So definitely huge if you're in, you know, that consumer goods space. I would also say very significantly, let's see, home services is obviously massive. Anytime you can do like scan to call, scan to schedule, scan to get a free consultation, you're always going to see very like solid results there, especially if you're thoughtful about your audience. Trying to think, you know, one that I would really love to see that hasn't activated, but I think, you know, just based on the nature of the volume, again, talking about frequency, talking about consumer behavior, legal. I could see legal being such a massive category just for like my favorite call to action that I've ever seen that blew it out of the water that I've never seen replicated was scan to find out if you have a case. So in things like personal injury or employment law, you know, a lot of times it's part of the research process is not even knowing if you're qualified to pursue legal action anyway. Talk about lead farming, but also establishing yourself as an expert and having that established one-to-one connection. God forbid somebody actually needs that legal assistance in the future. Flowcode makes it possible for you to have an immediate conversation with that person when it happens. So definitely super interesting there. But again, you know, I could give you a cop-out answer. I just feel like everything makes, it almost makes too much sense. It almost makes too it's hard for me to just say like, oh, this one, that one, everything that I've seen so far.
Megan, there was a follow-up question that came in on this one, and I think it piggybacks well here. Could either of you, Blaine or Megan, give an example of maybe a travel client that utilized QR codes and had success?
Okay, so if you've been to the airport recently and you've seen Clear is a Flowcode client, and you are actually, it's similar to a TSA pre-check, right? So you go, you register, and then you're supposed to be able to bypass security lines. Their sign-up flow is scan to sign up, which is really fascinating. And so while decidedly not a plane, train, or automobile, it's definitely something that we see extremely high volume on because it's so quick and easy, right? You're in an airport, you're in a rush, you don't necessarily want to talk to anybody because it's too chaotic. You just scan the code and you go, and it's really fascinating. So that's an amazing one. And then we also see, you know, we've seen a lot of campaigns for companies like Travelocity or Expedia Booking.com, I believe, is another one. American Airlines is another one. They do Flowcode in out of home. But essentially, you know, it could be, the thing that's fun about travel is that it could mimic the experience or it could be transactional, right? So on the more creative end, you could see something fun like, you know, I see an ad from Expedia for an all-inclusive resort, scan the code, and then I have an AR experience of that beach, right? Like you could really get experiential with it and get the hooks in. The other side of that is, you know, scan to buy your next vacation, you know, a hotel chain with a code in room where you can book your next trip before you even check out. There's a lot of really incredible examples that are great for just driving revenue. And you see partners like Butler Hospitality, the city buses in New York, the double-decker buses, we see that, city tours, I forget what they're actually called, but too many examples, so many examples in travel and hospitality.
That's awesome. Thank you. Blaine, you want to add anything to that, or?
I can touch on, it's not really travel, but she mentioned having it in room. One use case that we have right now is an urgent care company that I do marketing for. One of the things that we're doing is putting it on TVs or on signs in the waiting room. For
interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, there's nothing else for them to do, right? They're sitting there, they're gonna scan that QR code. So then driving whatever initiative you have while they're sitting there is huge.
It's a great idea.
Polling. I mean, goodness, at that point, that's when you're collecting your own audience metrics and all of this. You know, Nielsen who at that point.
Let's do one more question together. This has been fantastic. We're a little bit over time schedule, but I think nobody minds. The crowd is sticking. So let's do one more question. If you add a QR code to a spot that already has a toll-free number and or a URL, what is the impact for response of each type of response mechanism? So QR code, 800 number, URL. Like is there adding more responses to the pie? Are we taking the pie and cutting it into more slices? Like, let's talk about the dough.
Yeah, so, you know, I don't have a hard metric for, you know, what percentage of audience does each action. I'd have to do some digging on that one. But what I'll tell you is that we have a really incredible case study for Medicare, where the spot ran without a flow code and just the 800 number, did great. I want to say it was like a 15% conversion rate, normal. They added the flow code and they had a 35% increase in phone calls. Same conversion rate, but a 35% increase. And they just did a scan to dial, which, you know, very smart, immediately dials. So that's one that we love. Another one that we've seen, goodness. Gosh, what was so we're talking about, you guys, I totally just lost my train of thought. I got it.
No problem, I'll jump in. So we were talking about like the difference in the ratio of response mechanisms from QR codes, toll-free number, URLs.
There, and I got really distracted about Medicare because I was thinking about that 35% lift because it's so significant. The other one that we've seen, and we did some testing, some surveying, 7,000 households responded to our survey, and we basically asked the question, you know, have you responded to QR and advertising? You know, have you dialed an 800 number, typed in a URL? And what we actually found was that consumers were 2 times more likely to scan a code, or no, 3 times more likely to scan a code than dial an 800 number, 2 times more likely to scan a code than punch in a URL, and that was based on generic QR. And then if you look at flow code against generic QR, people are about 2.5 times as likely to scan a flow code than a generic QR code. So all of this to say that, like, you're not necessarily, like, people are going to complete the action however they want to, right? Some people are always going to prefer a phone call. Some people are always going to prefer typing in the URL. We know that right now, according to consumer data, we see that people generally prefer the ease of scanning a QR code over the other 2 actions. And we also know that based on a campaign, I believe this one was for Kohler, we found out that the likelihood of conversion went up with scan to form completion rather than the phone call. They found that people who scanned the code and filled out a qualifying form online were actually a lot more qualified to convert than those who just scanned and called in. So lots of interesting insights there, but I'd have to do a little more research to see like if all three are present, what's the percentage of each? But we haven't seen any like robbing Peter to pay Paul yet. So.
No, I like that idea too. And I love the idea of testing, right, for your Medicare. I think that testing one channel, two channels, and kind of seeing as it plays out, and the natural then action that the customer takes is their own preference, right?
Yep.
Well,
exactly.
folks, I jumped back on screen here to wrap things up. We had a phenomenal conversation today. Meghan, Blaine, Chris, thank you so much for your time, your experience, your energy, and sharing all your industry knowledge with us. I mean, how fun was today? I think we could have gone on for another hour, but we only promised 20 minutes, so we have to call it close today. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to our next episode of the PDMI Take 20, which is hosted on Wednesday, August 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'd also like to remind you that PDMI's fall conference, PDMI West, is scheduled for October 9 through 11 in San Diego at the Intercontinental Hotel. I can't wait to see each and every one of you down there for the show. It's going to be amazing, a blast, a lot of fun, ton of great information, some good networking, and it's a must-attend event. For those planning to stay on site at the Intercontinental Hotel, rooms are available at the hotel at a discounted rate of $314 a night, no amenity fee. However, to get your room, you must first have your badge. So go to thepdmi.com. That is thepdmi.com. Get your badge, get your room, get to San Diego, and hang out with all these intelligent people, including Blaine and Meghan and Chris. So we look forward to seeing you in San Diego. Thanks for joining us today. Catch you on the next Take 20, which again is on the 23rd of August. All the best, everyone.
Thank you.